The sun rose slowly over the vast prairie, casting a warm golden light across the rolling fields of grass. This land was both beautiful and harsh, stretching endlessly under a wide-open sky, dotted with wildflowers that danced in the gentle breeze. Here, in this quiet corner of the world, stood a small clinic made of weathered wood. It was simple but sturdy, a refuge for those who needed care in this rugged landscape. Inside the clinic, the air was filled with the scents of antiseptic and herbs, a mix that spoke of healing and hope. The walls were lined with shelves full of supplies, from bandages to bottles of medicine. The doctor who worked here had dedicated his life to helping others, even when it meant facing danger or loneliness. With each patient who walked through the door, he felt a sense of purpose, driven by compassion. However, life on the prairie was not easy. The doctor faced many challenges daily: limited resources, harsh weather conditions, and sometimes the distrustful eyes of those from nearby military posts. The isolation often weighed heavily on him as he tended to his patients alone, with only the sounds of nature and the occasional call of a hawk overhead to keep him company. Despite these difficulties, he remained committed to his work. He knew that every life mattered and that his small clinic was a beacon of hope for those seeking help in this unforgiving land. Little did he know that soon he would be tested like never before. The Prairie Doctor, known as Dr. Samuel Hayes, was a man of great kindness and unwavering courage. With tousled dark hair and a weathered face that bore witness to many long days, he had earned the respect of those who ventured to his clinic. His worn leather boots often kicked up dust as he hurried from one patient to another, embodying the spirit of determination that defined his life's work. Dr. Hayes had grown up in a bustling town but chose to leave it all behind in search of a purpose more profound than himself. He believed that every life mattered, whether it belonged to a settler, a traveler, or even an Apache scout. This belief fueled his desire to provide care for anyone who needed help, regardless of their background or circumstances. His hands were skilled from years of practice, moving quickly and confidently as he treated wounds and eased ailments. He had an innate ability to comfort those in pain with kind words and a steady presence. Many came to see him not just for medical assistance but also for the warmth he brought into their lives during difficult times. As he worked late into the night, the stars twinkled above like distant beacons of hope. Dr. Hayes often reflected on his choice to serve in such a remote place. He knew the risks but felt it was his calling to heal and protect others amidst the vastness of the prairie. Little did he realize that soon, his bravery would be tested in ways he had never imagined. The day had been quiet when a sudden commotion outside the clinic shattered the stillness. Dr. Hayes looked up from his notes, sensing that something urgent was unfolding. Just then, the door burst open, and a young man stumbled in, cradling an Apache scout in his arms. The scout's face was pale, and sweat dripped from his brow as he gasped for breath. "Doc, help him!" the young man cried, panic evident in his voice. Dr. Hayes quickly assessed the situation, noticing the scout's rapid breathing and the high fever radiating from his skin. Without hesitation, he motioned for a cot and rushed to the injured man's side. As he worked swiftly, Dr. Hayes could see that the scout had suffered a severe injury. His leg was wounded and infected. The doctor knew time was of the essence. If he didn't act fast, the fever could claim the young man's life. He grabbed antiseptic and bandages, preparing to clean and dress the wound while keeping a close eye on the fever that threatened to overwhelm him. The clinic was filled with tension as Dr. Hayes focused intently on his task. Outside, he could hear whispers of discontent among local settlers who might not approve of treating an Apache scout. Yet all that mattered to him at this moment was saving a life, no matter whose it was. With each passing second, he felt a growing urgency as he poured every bit of skill and compassion into helping this brave young warrior. As Dr. Hayes worked feverishly to stabilize the Apache scout, his mind raced with conflicting thoughts. He knew that treating this young man could have dire consequences. Outside, the growing murmurs of the local cavalry echoed through the clinic walls, their presence a constant reminder of the tension between settlers and Native Americans. The doctor had witnessed the anger and prejudice that often flared up in these situations, and he could only imagine how they would react if they discovered him treating an Apache. Yet, in his heart, Dr. Hayes believed that life was sacred, regardless of a person's background. He recalled the many faces he had treated in his clinic. Farmers, travelers, and now this brave scout who needed help the most. The doctor wrestled with his conscience as he applied antiseptic to the scout's infected leg, knowing that if he saved this life, it might put his own at risk. What if the cavalry burst in at any moment? Would they see him as a traitor for helping an enemy? The possibility loomed large in his mind, but leaving the scout to suffer was not an option he could accept. His oath as a healer compelled him to act against societal expectations and prejudices. Torn between duty and danger, Dr. Hayes pressed on, determined to save a life while grappling with the ethical challenges that came with it. As Dr. Hayes worked tirelessly in the clinic, word of the Apache scout being treated spread like wildfire among the local cavalry. It began with a few whispered conversations among soldiers, their initial disbelief quickly turning to outrage as they realized what was happening inside the small wooden structure. News traveled from one campfire to another, fueled by anger and a sense of betrayal that someone would dare to treat an enemy. The tension escalated as more soldiers gathered, their faces hardening with determination. "We can't let this stand," one voice boomed, cutting through the night air. "That doctor is aiding the enemy. He's a traitor to our people." The crowd's temper flared like dry kindling, igniting feelings of injustice and fear toward those they saw as threats. Soon, a sizable group formed outside the clinic, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit prairie. Sabers glinted ominously as they raised their voices in angry shouts for Dr. Hayes to come out and face them. He could hear clear demands echoing through the walls, orders intended to drive him away and put an end to what they perceived as his reckless act of defiance. Inside, Dr. Hayes felt the weight of their fury pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. He glanced at the Apache scout lying weakly on the cot, knowing that time was running out for both of them. As he continued tending to his patient, he realized that whatever happened next would not only determine their fates, but also challenge everything he stood for as a healer. Dr. Hayes took a deep breath, focusing his mind on the task at hand despite the growing chaos outside. His hands moved with practiced efficiency as he checked the Apache scout's vitals and assessed the wound that had caused the fever. The infection was serious, but he knew that if he could bring down the fever, it might give the scout a fighting chance. He rummaged through his limited supplies, quickly gathering herbs known for their healing properties. Willow bark for pain relief, sage to reduce inflammation, and a little honey to help with healing were among the ingredients he used. As he prepared a poultice, Dr. Hayes felt a rush of adrenaline. Every moment counted, and he was determined not to let fear hinder his ability to save a life. The loud shouts of displeased cavalrymen echoed outside, but he pushed them from his mind. He had seen patients from all walks of life, and this scout was no different. Embracing his role as a healer, he whispered words of encouragement to the young man lying on the cot, hoping that his voice could reach him even in his fevered state. With each application of the poultice and each careful adjustment of bandages, Dr. Hayes showcased his resourcefulness under pressure. He had only one shot at this. Failure was not an option. As sweat dripped from his brow, he poured every ounce of skill and compassion into saving this brave warrior's life, knowing that doing so would come at great risk to himself. Outside the clinic, the tension reached a boiling point as the cavalry soldiers formed a tight circle around the building. Their faces were drawn and angry, eyes narrowed with a mix of fury and determination. The sound of sabers clashing against each other filled the air, a threatening rhythm that underscored their demands. "Dr. Hayes, you need to come out now," shouted one of the sergeants, his voice booming over the din. "You're harboring an enemy in there. This is treason." Several soldiers nodded in agreement, their expressions fierce as they brandished their weapons. They believed that treating an Apache scout was an unforgivable act, one that undermined their mission and safety. Dr. Hayes could hear their shouts and felt the adrenaline surging through him as he worked on the scout. He knew he couldn't abandon his patient despite the threats outside. "I can't leave him," he whispered to himself as he tightened the bandages on the scout's leg, hoping that his focus would shield him from the chaos outside. The sergeant continued his tirade. "Either you bring that savage out or we'll come in after him." With every word, Dr. Hayes felt an increasing pressure building in his chest. They were not just challenging his actions. They were questioning his very principles as a healer. He took a deep breath and steeled himself for what lay ahead. He understood that stepping outside could mean facing the wrath of a mob, but he also realized he had to stand firm for what he believed in. A life was at stake, and he would not back down without a fight. As Dr. Hayes continued his work, he felt the Apache scout's body start to tremble under the weight of a rising fever. Sweat soaked through the bandages he had applied, and the young man's breathing became shallower and more irregular. The fever was intensifying, and Dr. Hayes knew that time was slipping away. Sitting beside the cot, he studied the scout's pallid face, which was now flushed with fever. "Stay with me," he whispered, gripping the scout's hand gently in an attempt to anchor him. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, there was a flicker of awareness, but it soon faded again into a deep haze. Dr. Hayes quickly checked the wound on the scout's leg, noting that the infection was spreading despite his previous efforts. Panic gripped him as he realized that he needed stronger measures. He had to get the fever down, or all hope would be lost. He reached for a clean cloth and dipped it in cool water, placing it on the scout's forehead while whispering soothing reassurances. Outside, the soldiers' voices grew louder, their impatience palpable. The pounding of their boots against the wooden floor felt like a countdown to disaster. Dr. Hayes could sense that his time was limited. He had to act decisively and quickly. With a determined glance at his patient, he knew he had to prepare a stronger treatment immediately. Every second mattered now, and failure was not an option. As Dr. Hayes prepared the stronger treatment for the Apache scout, the loud shouts outside grew even more intense. The soldier's demands rang through the air, mingling with the growing storm of his own thoughts. Despite the fear swirling around him, a sense of calm determination settled within the doctor. He had made a choice, one rooted in compassion, and he would not let intimidation sway him. Finally, unable to ignore their threats any longer, he stepped toward the door, his heart pounding but resolute. He opened it just enough to face the crowd of soldiers, their sabers glinting ominously in the fading light. "You need to listen to me," he called out firmly, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "This young man's life is in danger. He is a human being deserving of care, just like any of you." Some soldiers shifted uncomfortably at his words, while others shouted back with anger. "He's an enemy," one soldier yelled, raising his saber defiantly. But Dr. Hayes stood his ground, refusing to back down. "You cannot let fear dictate your actions," he urged passionately. "Every life matters, Apache or settler. I will not sacrifice this boy for your prejudice." His words hung in the air, a plea for humanity amid rising tensions. In that moment, Dr. Hayes chose to stand firm for compassion and justice, knowing that true courage meant defending life against all odds, even when faced with overwhelming hostility. He turned back to the scout inside, hopeful that somehow his stand would inspire a change in hearts outside and allow him to save a life that mattered deeply to him. As Dr. Hayes returned to the scout's side, he felt a shift in the atmosphere outside. The soldiers, initially filled with anger and bravado, hesitated, their expressions wavering between anger and uncertainty. It was as if his plea had struck a chord within them, forcing some to reconsider their stance. Their hearts were beginning to give way to the humanity he had called upon. Just then, from the back of the crowd, one soldier stepped forward, lowering his saber as he spoke. "He's right. We all deserve care and compassion, even if we are not the same." His voice was firm, but an air of vulnerability surrounded him. The other soldiers glanced at one another, their growing doubt palpable. Slowly, they began to lower their weapons, the tension that once surrounded the clinic starting to dissipate. Seeing this moment of change, Dr. Hayes pressed on. "Life is precious, and in helping each other, we can mend what divides us," he urged, hopeful that this revelation would continue to unravel the bitterness among them. While the cavalry debated among themselves, Dr. Hayes focused intently on the scout. After administering the stronger treatment, he breathed a sigh of relief as the young man's fever began to ebb. Once the immediate crisis settled, both Dr. Hayes and the community reflected on this encounter. It became clear that compassion had a powerful place even in times of division. The doctor realized that his stand had not just saved a life. It had fostered an understanding that could lead to healing beyond his clinic walls. For the first time in weeks, Dr. Hayes felt optimistic that perhaps they could all find a way to coexist and uplift one another in essentially caring for their shared humanity.